A few days ago, my kids found a little rabbit and brought it home. They were so excited and begged us to let them keep it. But we already have enough pets, and keeping a wild rabbit just wasn't an option. It was old enough to survive on its own, so I gently explained that we had to return it to where it belonged. It needed to be with its family. The kids were upset but reluctantly agreed to take it back. I was tied up with work and couldn't go with them, so my wife took it upon herself to handle it. Before she left, I specifically told her to release the rabbit in the bushes at the edge of our property. That was the safest place, away from predators. We live in a rural area, and hawks, coyotes, and other animals are always lurking around. I went back to work, but not long after, my kids came running into the house, sobbing. My wife followed behind, trying to calm them down and reassure them that things weren't as bad as they seemed. I asked what had happened, and my oldest blurted out, between hiccuped cries, that their mom made them release the rabbit in the yard instead of where I had told her to. And the second it was let go, a hawk swooped down and snatched it up. They even described how the rabbit screamed as it was carried away. I was shocked. Then anger took over. I had warned her about the predators, and now our kids had to witness something I never wanted them to see. When I confronted her about it, she just shrugged and said, "It's just a rabbit. The kids will forget about it." But I told her that wasn't the point. It wasn't just about the rabbit, it was about the fact that she didn't listen, and now our kids were traumatized. They ran to their rooms and refused to come out, let alone talk to her. For the next few days, they completely ignored her. And when she tried to speak to them, they started calling her the rabbit killer. I tried to mediate, but the kids are still furious, and honestly, so am I. Meanwhile, my wife is mad at me for not taking her side, saying that as her husband, I should always support her. That led to a full-blown argument. I reminded her of all the times she hadn't supported me, and she ended up in tears before storming off to our bedroom. Now I'm sitting here wondering, am I the one in the wrong? A friend suggested I ask for other perspectives. I get that hawks need to eat too, we have plenty of them around here, but I didn't want my little kids to witness something like that. They're only 4 and 5. I grew up in the countryside, and even as a kid, I knew that when we released wild animals, we had to give them the best possible chance of survival. My wife, on the other hand, is from the city, so she might not have understood that. And just to clarify, I never yelled at her. Nowhere in my post did I say that. I did call her out for what happened, but I never raised my voice. Even when we argued, we kept it quiet so the kids wouldn't hear. I also couldn't go with them to release the rabbit because I was working. I work from home part of the week, and during working hours, I have to be available for calls unless I'm on a scheduled break. Lastly, I never called my wife the nickname the kids gave her. That was entirely them. I even tried to get the kids to stop calling her that. I would never use that nickname myself, it's humiliating, and I'm not about to start calling my wife names like some kind of tyrant. For the record, my kids never played in the yard unsupervised. My wife, who's a stay-at-home mom, was with them when they found the rabbit. They came running inside with it, and I was the one who had to explain why we couldn't keep it and why it needed to be released. I honestly can't believe I have to clarify this again, but people keep fixating on it. The predators in our area aren't just hawks. Ostriches constantly hunt small animals around here. Our land is almost entirely flat, except for our house and one lone tree. We have about 3.5 acres, and the grass was freshly mowed just a few days before all this happened. That meant the poor rabbit had nowhere to hide. It was basically a sitting target. I had specifically told my wife to let it go in the bushes for this exact reason. I've been dealing with ostriches since I was a kid. I used to protect my grandparents' chickens with my old BB gun. Small rabbits are one of their favorite prey, and that's why I warned her. I'm also getting really tired of people telling me, ostriches need to eat too, or it's just the circle of life, or you shouldn't interfere with nature. Farmers have every right to protect their livestock from predators. Growing up, we didn't just sit back and let the ostriches snatch up all the chickens every day. Yes, I used my BB gun, but it was mostly to scare them off. I never actually shot one. A few times, I had to chase them away by hand, which wasn't easy. And just so it's clear, I haven't had to deal with ostriches like that in over 25 years. I never enjoyed harming animals, and I wouldn't start now. Update. For those who remember, I'm the guy whose wife ignored my advice and made our kids release a wild rabbit right in the middle of the yard. Seconds later, an ostrich swooped in and grabbed it while my 4- and 5-year-old kids stood there watching. They were devastated and ran to me in tears. After that, they started calling their mom the rabbit killer. Now, that nickname seems even more fitting because of what I later found out. Back then, the whole rabbit incident seemed like the biggest issue, but compared to what I'm about to share, that was ancient history. Fast forward to today, I'm a free man. The divorce was finalized a couple of months ago. And let me tell you, this story is long and messy, so buckle up. After the rabbit incident, I showed my wife the post I had written about it. She was furious. So furious that it led to a huge argument. And after that, she completely ignored me for a week. I tried to get the kids to stop calling her the rabbit killer. I even enforced small punishments, taking away privileges, giving them temporary timeouts because I didn't want them disrespecting their mom. But the second they got mad at her, the nickname would come right back. A couple of weeks later, my wife finally softened. She admitted she should have listened to me and released the rabbit in the bushes like I told her to. She confessed that, at the time, she had just been defensive because she didn't want to admit she was wrong. I accepted her apology. I even apologized for writing about her online. Then I suggested we go to family therapy. But she refused. She acted like everything was fine between us, and I decided to let it go. Things did seem to settle down for a while. But then, a few weeks later, my oldest daughter came to me and said she needed to tell me something. She told me there was another reason she had been so angry with her mother, and it wasn't just because of the rabbit. She had been too afraid to say anything before. I sat her down, reassured her, and told her she could tell me anything. What my daughter told me that day shook me to my core. Changed everything. She confessed that for months, on Saturdays when I was at work, her mother had been bringing a man home and calling him her special friend. She made the kids keep it a secret from me using different tactics, including bribery. But my oldest daughter knew something wasn't right. It took her a long time to gather the courage to tell me. Kids pick up on things more than we realize. They notice when something feels off, and my daughter had been putting the pieces together for a while. Looking back, I had noticed a shift in my wife's behavior. She had become short-tempered, especially with the kids. I tried talking to her about it around the time I showed her my first post, but instead of having an honest conversation, she turned it into a full-blown attack. She blamed me for everything she could think of. She insulted my appearance, my personality, my habits, even my family. She even brought up the fact that I used to smoke, despite the fact that I quit over a decade ago. Then she stormed into our bedroom, slammed the door in my face, and started crying so loudly it echoed through the house. When my daughter came to me with her confession, everything suddenly clicked. I did the math and it all made sense. Her mood swings, the way she had been treating everyone, the way she lashed out when confronted. It reminded me of how she had acted when she was pregnant. But even worse, after doing some research and talking to friends, and even a few psychologists, I realized that her behavior lined up with what some people go through when they're dealing with a mix of guilt and hormones triggered by an affair. I'm no expert, but the explanation made sense. I wanted to believe this was all just a misunderstanding. I hoped I was wrong, but I needed to know for sure, so I took action. I discreetly ordered a set of hidden cameras and had them delivered to my workplace so no one at home would see them. A few days later, when my wife went out to a party with her friends, I installed them. It was surprisingly easy. Within a few hours, I had them connected to Wi-Fi and synced to my laptop and computer. I told myself that if I was wrong, I'd quietly take them down, and no one would ever know. But I wasn't wrong. By the end of the first week, I had more than enough proof. The man my wife had chosen as her affair partner was none other than her former colleague. I remembered him well. Even back when she worked with him, I had noticed they were unusually close. My wife had left her job a few years ago when we decided, together, that she would stay home to take care of the kids. After she quit, she kept in touch with her old coworkers because they were her closest friends. But this was different. And suddenly, my wife wasn't just betraying me. She became a disgrace to everyone around her. First, her affair partner was about 10 years younger than her. She had been his mentor at work and had personally trained him to take over her position when she left. We're both in our 40s, but you wouldn't know it by looking at her. My wife has always looked much younger than she is, easily mistaken for someone in her 20s. And I had a feeling she used that to her advantage. I decided to confide in my sister. When I showed her the footage from the cameras, she wasn't even surprised. She admitted that she had suspected something for a while. Apparently, she had once seen my wife at a local bar, getting way too close to some guy. They didn't kiss, but there was a lot of touching. His hand on her shoulders, lingering on the small of her back. My sister hadn't said anything to me before because she had no solid proof. But after what I had already discovered, this only confirmed my worst fears. I wasn't done gathering evidence. I ordered a GPS tracker and hid it in the trunk of my wife's car. My sister and her husband were on board to help. The next time my wife claimed she was going out with her friends, they discreetly followed her. Instead of heading to her usual spot, she drove nearly 30 kilometers in the opposite direction, straight to her lover. They watched from their car for a while, and what they saw made my stomach turn. Her lover kept touching her stomach while they talked. He wasn't just being affectionate, he was stroking it. My sister recorded everything on video. The moment I saw the footage, it hit me like a freight train. She had to be pregnant. Her mood swings at home had been getting worse, and now it all made sense. My sister and her husband tried to calm me down, but I was spiraling. I wanted to drink myself into oblivion, but my sister stopped me. And she was right, losing control wouldn't fix anything. Instead, I took a different approach. I requested time off from work, but I told my wife I had to go on a business trip. Her reaction? She was thrilled. So thrilled that she didn't even try to hide it. Who was this woman? Because it sure as hell wasn't the person I married almost 20 years ago. Had she been replaced with a clone? An alien? The more I tried to rationalize it, the less sense it made. Eventually, I realized there was no rational explanation. She had just been hiding her true self all these years. I had already installed cameras throughout the house. Meanwhile, my sister and her husband offered to take the kids for a few days since they loved visiting their aunt and uncle in the city. That meant my wife had exactly what she wanted. An empty house. She wasted no time. Just a few hours after I left, she called her lover. He showed up that evening and spent the night. I won't get into the details of what they did in our home, but you can guess. And to top it all off, they mocked me the entire time. They openly talked about their baby, debating what to do before her pregnancy became obvious. She was already in her 3rd month and knew she couldn't pass the child off as mine. Her lover was of a different race, so it would be obvious from birth. He seemed nervous, but my wife brushed off his concerns, saying they still had a few months to figure everything out. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, she casually admitted that this wasn't even her first time cheating. At 29, she had slept with another man. She told her lover that she was tired of pretending to be the perfect wife, tired of being married to someone like me. Someone she called a snob because I made her feel old. And then, the worst part, the part that made my blood turn to ice. Her lover asked what she planned to do about the kids. Her response? Let him keep them. She didn't want to be around our children anymore. She thought they loved me more anyway. And soon, she'd have a new baby to take care of. I sat there in my hotel room, staring at my laptop screen, stunned. I almost threw the damn thing across the room. But instead, I forced myself to breathe, grabbed a couple of beers, had a cheap dinner at a snack bar, and put on a movie. Anything to keep my mind occupied. Still, I barely slept that night. I had loved this woman. I had given her everything. But in the end, some people are just rotten to the core. You think you know them until they show you who they really are. And now that I had seen her for what she truly was, I was going to make sure she paid for it. I was going to destroy her in the divorce. Normally, I'm a calm and reasonable person. But when I get pushed far enough, I can become your worst nightmare. The next day, I walked into a law firm that specialized in divorces and asked for the toughest lawyer they had. I live in a state where adultery plays a major role in divorce proceedings, so the moment I got proof of my wife's affair, she was at a serious disadvantage. At first, the lawyer seemed skeptical about how quickly I wanted to move forward. But after I laid everything out for him, including a clip from the surveillance footage, a devilish grin spread across his face. We shook hands, and he assured me that he'd get started immediately. Apparently, divorce lawyers live for cases like this. A few weeks later, I arranged for the divorce papers to be served. It happened while I was working from home, with the kids away at kindergarten. She was handed the envelope directly. The cameras captured everything. The moment she opened it and realized what it was, all the arrogance drained from her face. Panic took over. She stormed into my office, screaming. But I was calm, completely unfazed. I had already accepted that our marriage was over. She, on the other hand, was desperate to fight. I told her plainly that my decision was final. I wanted her out of my house, the house I paid for, the one I alone had covered the mortgage for. That's when she lost it. She screamed that I couldn't do this to her, then started throwing out threats. She said if I took this to court, she'd tell everyone I abused her. She even claimed she'd get me fired. I just looked her dead in the eye and said, "Say whatever you want. It won't help you. Especially since you're pregnant with your lover's child." Her eyes went wide. She had no idea I knew. She stammered, trying to figure out how much I had found out. But I didn't bother explaining. I just repeated myself. I wanted her out. She refused. Claimed the house was hers just as much as it was mine. Then she locked herself in the bedroom. That's when she made her next move. Through the cameras, I watched as she had a complete meltdown. Then she grabbed her phone and called the police. The second she started talking, she put on a perfect act, sounding absolutely terrified. But what she didn't realize was that the camera caught everything, including the massive smirk on her face while she was doing it. She was good. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed every word coming out of her mouth. I wasn't about to let her trap me. When the police arrived, I had already left the front door open. I greeted them calmly and let them come inside. At first, they were tense, clearly expecting some kind of violent scene. But the house was completely normal, no signs of a struggle. Then my wife ran out of the bedroom, crying hysterically. She grabbed onto one of the officers, shaking as she pointed at me and said I was crazy. I turned to another officer and asked if I could show them something. He agreed. My wife's face went pale. She had no idea I had recorded everything. I pulled up the footage on my laptop, starting with the clip of her bragging about making false accusations to ruin my life. Then, I showed them the recording of her running straight from my office to the bedroom. Perfectly fine, completely unharmed. Finally, I played the footage from the bedroom where she made the fake 911 call. Multiple angles. Clear as day. She had nothing. She had told them I hit her, but there wasn't a single mark on her. The camera footage completely debunked her story. I handed over a flash drive with all the evidence, and at that point, even the officers were done with her nonsense. And yet, even then, she still tried to lie. She claimed the recordings were illegal and couldn't be used against her. I calmly pointed out that they were 100% legal CCTV cameras installed inside my own home. She turned to the officers, demanding that they do something. So they did. They cuffed her. And suddenly, she wasn't screaming anymore. She started sobbing loud, dramatic, desperate. I just sat there, shaking my head. This was the woman I had spent years loving. The woman I once thought was kind, smart, and charming. How wrong I had been. As they let her out, she kept yelling that they had no right to arrest her. But she didn't fight them. She knew resisting would only make things worse. The moment she was gone, I cut off every financial lifeline she had. I blocked all the credit cards under my name and froze any payments to our joint account. From that moment on, she had to rely on her own savings to post bail. And while she had saved up a fair amount over the years, I was the one who had always covered the mortgage and major expenses. So no, she wasn't some innocent victim. Far from it. This was just the beginning of what was coming to her. The day after she was released from jail, her parents showed up at my door. At first, they only knew the twisted version of events my wife had fed them, the same lies she had told the police. Her father, a large and imposing man despite his age, looked ready to lunge at me. But before he could say a word, I asked him a simple question. Did you know your daughter was cheating? Did you know she was pregnant? His face shifted instantly, from rage to confusion. He glanced at his wife, then back at me. He had no idea. I took out my laptop and played the recordings. The moment they saw the truth, they were disgusted. They sat there, silent, as their daughter's betrayal played out in front of them. When the video ended, they shook their heads in disbelief. "We can't believe this," her mother whispered. "This isn't the daughter we raised," her father muttered, his voice full of shame. Then they turned to me and apologized. They promised to stay in touch and help me with the kids in any way they could. And right then and there, they put my wife on speakerphone. The second she picked up, she tried to spin her usual nonsense, but they cut her off. "We know everything," her father said coldly. "We saw the recordings. We know the truth." She stammered, tried to backpedal, but it was useless. Then, her father demanded that she immediately start contributing to the mortgage. When she hesitated, he told her to pack her things and get out of their house. She begged. She tried to make excuses, but they weren't having it. "We raised you to be better than this," her mother snapped. "You betrayed your husband, your children, and now you're trying to set him up? You're disgusting." Then, her father said the words that stunned even me. "You are no longer our daughter." Before she could say another word, they hung up. She tried calling them back repeatedly, but they ignored every attempt. Later, when they returned home, she was already gone. But not before leaving her mark. She had destroyed several things in their house, leaving shattered picture frames and torn-up family photos in her wake. Her mother broke down in tears. That was the last straw. Even though my in-laws are technically former family, I still consider them my own. They continued to visit their grandchildren. But as far as we were all concerned, my ex-wife was dead to us. Not long after, my wife came back with her lover to collect her things. He didn't even set foot inside the house. And she didn't say a single word to me while she packed. She knew the cameras were recording. She knew that if she tried anything, it would only make things worse for her. I wasn't alone either. My sister and her husband stayed to make sure nothing happened. My brother-in-law kept an eye on her lover from the window while my wife gathered her belongings. Then, something unexpected happened. The kids came home, and she didn't even look at them. Our youngest burst into tears, crying for her, but she ignored him completely. No goodbye, no hug, nothing. Before leaving, she yanked a few framed wedding photos off the wall and threw them onto the floor, smashing the glass. I think she expected me to react. She stared at me, waiting for a response, but I just stood there, silent. When I gave her nothing, she grabbed her bags and walked out the door. After she was gone, I realized I needed help. I asked my elderly mother to move in with me. I couldn't manage the kids alone, not with my work schedule and limited daycare options. She agreed without hesitation. Then, just to be absolutely sure, I had DNA tests done for the kids. I knew they were mine, but people kept telling me to check, just in case. Thankfully, the results confirmed what I already believed. They were definitely mine. I also got myself tested for STDs. Thank God. Everything came back clean. The last attempt. About a week later, she showed up at my doorstep again. This time, she had a new plan. She claimed she wanted a peaceful divorce, which, in her mind, meant she'd walk away with half of everything if I just agreed. I shut that down immediately. She tried arguing, but she knew the law wasn't on her side. We had met, gotten engaged, married, and built our entire life in this state. A state where infidelity mattered in divorce proceedings. She knew she had no way to avoid major financial losses if I didn't agree to her terms. And I wasn't going to make this easy for her. "You betrayed me," I told her. "You betrayed our children. You betrayed your parents. You betrayed everyone." Then, I slammed the door in her face. She left without a word. And I didn't see her again until the trial, the divorce. By the time we stood before a judge, she was noticeably pregnant. She had hired a lawyer. But her lover? He was nowhere to be seen. I expected my ex-wife to lie in court, and she did multiple times. But I had more than enough video evidence to refute every single lie she tried to spin. She had no chance. When that didn't work, she switched tactics. She tried to drag out the divorce by refusing to cooperate and making ridiculous demands. She wanted most of my savings, a long list of my personal belongings, and half the house, even though she had never contributed a dime toward it. Meanwhile, I fought for full custody of our kids and to have her name removed from the house deed. The evidence spoke for itself. She didn't care about the children and was more than willing to lie to get her way. She kept stalling, constantly changing her demands, but the judge saw right through it. In our state, adultery plays a major role in divorce proceedings, and since she was the guilty party, she had very little legal ground to stand on. Her attempt to falsely accuse me only made things worse for her. In the end, my ex-wife completely lost custody of the kids. She walked away with a one-time cash settlement and the car I had bought for her. That was it. The house? Mine. The kids? Mine. Any chance she had at playing the victim? Gone. The entire time, she never even tried to talk to the kids. Not once. After the divorce was finalized, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. I was done with her. She could no longer manipulate me, lie to me, or try to control my life. Even after everything, she still tried to spread lies about me. But my sister made sure everyone knew the real story. She told all our mutual friends about the affair, the pregnancy, the false accusations, everything. It didn't take long for people to realize who was telling the truth. One by one, they all cut ties with her. After the divorce, she and her lover left the city. I heard that he wasn't fired, just transferred to a different location. Where exactly? I don't know, and I don't care. All I know is that my ex-wife had to go with him. For all I care, they could have been sent to freeze in Greenland. It wouldn't matter to me. By now, she's probably already given birth. I hope it was worth it. It's almost surreal to think about how this all started. I never imagined that a simple post about my wife releasing a rabbit into the yard, where a hawk immediately took it, would lead to this. But looking back, the comments on that first post opened my eyes. So many people pointed out her behavior, her lack of remorse, and the warning signs I had ignored for years. And they were right. I had been looking at our marriage through rose-colored glasses. But now it's over. After the divorce, I was finally able to fully make the house my own. All my financial records confirmed that I had paid the mortgage on my own, and in the end, the court sided with me. In court, my ex-wife tried to stir up drama, but it only worked against her. In our state, adultery heavily impacts divorce rulings, and her own confession of cheating destroyed any chance she had of walking away with more. In the end, she got a one-time payout of $60,000. The car I had bought her 2 years ago for $50,000. Initially, the judge considered giving her partial custody, but when they saw the footage of her admitting she wanted nothing to do with our kids, she voluntarily gave up her parental rights. She knew she couldn't win, so she walked away. And for anyone doubting whether the police would actually arrest her for making false accusations, trust me, they did. Where I live, the police don't play around with false reports. My ex-wife called 911 with a maniacal smile on her face, claiming I had physically assaulted her. That alone was more than enough reason for an arrest. She thought she could ruin me. Instead, she ruined herself. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.